Okay, so the last thing we want to become is a church that pursues an exhaustive list of rules and regulations. But sometimes it's important to remind ourselves of a few things. Around here, we're more interested in giving a cold cup of water to a thirsty person than we are in drinking it ourselves. Around here, we're more interested in rubbing shoulders with people who have made plenty of mistakes than we are in standing next to people who pretend they haven't. In other words, the prostitute wins. The Pharisee does not. Around here, we're more interested in following an unpredictable Savior than we are in crawling after the expected and the routinely predictable. Around here, we're more interested in equipping you to live in the real world, a world that God created and loves, than we are in creating a Christian bubble. And, just to be clear, we'll gladly search for one lost, over 99 found, every time. Around here, we're more interested in growing big people than we are in growing a big church. Around here, we're more interested in helping you discover a life of worship than we are in furthering a musical genre. And finally, around here, we're more interested in walking through life together than we are in watching each other from a safe distance. And we're very interested in showing you how this works. Friends, we are a community that is guided by these biblical values. They will guide every decision we make, every relationship we nurture, and every plan we conceive. This is the road we're choosing to travel, and you are invited to take the journey with us, because we'd love it if you joined us.
Get going, especially when you get tired. Has anybody in the room here gotten tired before and you feel like, you know what, I can't dig another ditch, or I can't do my job, or I can't wash another dish, or I can't drive to work today, or I can't lift this load that I have been lifting for such a long time? Well, that's the theme of the text. I've been studying people for a long time, and most, if not all, of the sports figures out there have become great. Those sports figures who have become great because of the hard work they've done behind the scenes. Most of the time, all we see are people in the spotlights. We see people, in their glory. We see people getting the awards. We were invited roughly a month ago to see Taylor Swift in concert. Wow. Where were we? In D.C., I think. I'm not into Taylor Swift at all. I couldn't name one song. No, I can't name one song that Taylor Swift sings. But when you have an invite, when somebody says, I will provide you with tickets to go see Taylor Swift, and I understand she's pretty popular, then you have a couple kids that are salivating, I'd love to go see Taylor Swift. You go. Well, I go there, and I'm sitting there, and I'm doing what I do for the sake of family. And you see these people on stage. You see all the glamour and the glitz and the lights and the people and screaming when they come out on stage. But you don't see all the rehearsals that go on behind the scenes. That's kind of like the theme a bit of where we're going here today. A guy named Robert South said, defeat should never be a source of discouragement. That's easier said than done, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Defeat, again, should never be a source of discouragement, but rather a fresh stimulus. Have you ever gotten so mad when you've fallen on your face that you jumped back up on your feet and said, I'm going to kick some behind because I got knocked down? Have you ever been in a fist fight? God, ladies, don't even, I'm not even going to look at the ladies because I hope the ladies don't get into fist fights. But us guys sometimes have gotten into fist fights, and the last thing you want to be is the last one down. You want to be the last one standing. And oftentimes, I don't know about you, but in your own internal struggles, or your own struggles at work, or with family, or issues that pop up from time to time, you just want to really stay down. You just want to say, I've had enough. Martin Luther King said, we must build really dikes of courage to hold back the flood of fear, he said. And sometimes that's an hour-by-hour thing, isn't it? Because oftentimes you want to tear down, you want to let go, you just want to stop striving, you want to stop climbing, because climbing is work. Climbing is hard. Turn over, if you will, to 1 Samuel in the Bible, Old Testament, 1 Samuel chapter 30. 1 Samuel chapter 30. There's a constant battle. Maybe it's not. Maybe this text here today is not for you. I hope it is. Maybe it's for me. Maybe it's for people who will play this sermon or listen to this later on. I don't know. But there's a constant battle for you and me to focus on what we see. There's a constant battle to focus on what we see. 1 Samuel chapter 30, New American Standard says this. When David, I'm in verse 3, when David and his men came to the city, behold, it was burned with fire. And their wives, now, let me pause. In that day, they weren't Mormons, but they could have multiple wives. I'm just putting that out there, okay? In that culture, it was acceptable, years before Mormonism. 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 3. When David and his men, the city was burned, and their wives, and their sons, and their daughters have been taken captive. That's not a good day. Verse 4. Then David and the people who were with him lifted their voices and wept until there was no strength in them to weep. Have you ever been so distraught that's like your tears have dried up? It's like, I can't cry anymore. I'm done. You've heard that term. I'm done. I don't have any more. I think that's kind of sort of where these people were at that time. Verse 5. Now David's two wives have been taken captive, and the Bible names their names. I'm not going to try it. Verse 6. Moreover, David was greatly distressed because the people spoke of stoning him. Now, in that text, stoning doesn't mean getting so drunk that you're stoned. That's not what I'm talking about. Stoning means that they bury you about halfway from the waist in dirt, and they throw these big rocks at you until you're dead. That's what they were talking about. So each one of his sons and his daughters, but David, listen, but David, it says, strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He strengthened himself in the Lord his God. How many times haven't you and I waited and waited and waited and waited for somebody else to encourage us, to lift us up, to lift our load, and you may be waiting for a very, very long time for that to happen. David chose to encourage himself in the Lord. Verse 7. Then David said to the priest, the son of Amalek, please bring me the ephod, which was an item for religion in that culture. Verse 8. David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? And he said to him, pursue, for you will surely overtake them, and you will surely rescue all. So in verse 9 it says, so David went. Now David didn't go by himself. It's pretty dangerous to go against an army by yourself.
That's right.
I think that's pretty stupid to go against an army by yourself, right? So verse 9, so David went, he and, listen, 600 men who were with him. That's pretty smart. And came to this brook where they had those left behind remained. But David pursued, he and now 400 men. So he had started with 6, 200 stayed behind, verse 10. He pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 who were too exhausted to cross the brook, they remained behind. You're going to find that there's going to be a percentage of the people around you who are going to be too tired to keep going. And guess what? I hate to say this, it's probably pretty nasty to say, but some people can't handle the big battles. Some people can't keep going. So you have to surround yourself with people who what? That can pursue, that can keep going in the middle of the difficulty. So then they came across this guy. Let's continue. So now they found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David. Now, an Egyptian at the time they weren't exactly friends. And he gave him bread and he ate, and he gave him water to drink. He gave him a piece of fig cake and 2 clusters of raisins, and he ate. And his spirit revived because he hadn't eaten for about 3 or 4 days, right? So David said to him, to whom do you belong? He said, I'm a young man of Egypt, a servant of the bad guys that took David's kids and his wife. So this guy was in kind of sort of work for the bad guy, right? So the story continues. But he says, this guy got sick. I'm now in verse 14. So we made a raid on these people, and then he got sick and he left them alone. So long story short, this Egyptian, helped David find the bad guys. Longer story short, He got his wives back, he got his kids back because he chose to keep going. In the middle, he encouraged himself in the Lord, which gave him what? The ammunition to continue to do what he had to do. I have to tell you again, 2 or 3 times, maybe 10 times here today, that sometimes we have to choose to encourage ourselves in the Lord. And again, that could come in many different forms. These days, like they didn't have 3,000, 4,000 years ago, is we have ways and means to encourage ourselves via audio, in the car, or of course we have a Bible to encourage ourselves, or any number of means that we have to be proactive and encourage ourselves. Now notice that in the middle of David's despair, he turned to God for direction. Listen, I'll say it again. In the middle of his despair, he turned to God for direction and then moved forward. Most of the time, I would say, maybe at least half the time, that you and I don't want to ask God for guidance in the middle of our difficult time. Because the last thing you and I want to do is look up when we're down. But our strength comes from God when we look up. And now David was no joke. I mean, we read about David as this little shepherd boy, in quotes. And, he took care of his daddy's sheep and took his goats and all this stuff. But in time, David was no wimp. I don't know about you, but I don't want to surround myself with wimps, with sissies, people who run at the smell of a battle or a difficult time. David reached the end of his discouragement and got up and kept going. Sometimes it's really hard for us to see the end of our discouragement, because sometimes discouragement seems to last. I'll stress that word. Discouragement seems to last forever. But really, when you stop and think about it, you only have a certain amount of valleys in your life. But it seems like those valleys they last for years. But if you look back, listen to this. If you look back in your own life, those valleys, you really can't remember all the valleys because they were really short-lived. But while you're in the middle of it, it seems like it's been lasting for months or years or decades. And really, that's not the case at all. A guy named Johnny Dodd writes a story. He said a few weeks ago, this is going back a few years now, 12-year-old Nicholas Knotts was playing softball at his junior high in Oxford, Michigan, when he heard one of the kids in the outfield yell, "Easy out." You ever been up to bat or people ridicule you for things that they think that you can't do? Hello. So this guy was just stepping up to bat. He was born with health issues and his left foot had been amputated when he was a baby. And he stood there waiting for the pitch and he watched as the opposing team members moved forward. Because they assumed, this handicapped kid can't do a whole lot. So he says, I popped it over their heads for a single. And that felt really good. What most kids didn't know that months earlier, Knott's got a crash course on the finer points of softball, along with some powerful skills about perseverance, and from a group of vets who had lost limbs, and more so they knew what it was like to be handicapped, for the lack of a better word. So they said, we wanted to show them that it's possible to compete even if you're missing a limb. You see, there's a huge difference between staying down when you get knocked down and getting back up when you get knocked down. I like the Rocky movies, and these Rocky movies are always inspirational. So whenever I'm down, on occasion, I'll either play a clip of the Rocky film, or when I'm really down for a long time, I'll pop in the Rocky DVDs and just really see and watch and just get some inspiration. But Rocky very seldom stayed down for very long. He got hit pretty hard in the films, of course, but he got back up quickly after that. Jesus stuck to his message. If anybody was tempted to just shut up, it was Jesus. Jesus could have very easily, lived a long life, but he had his goal was to fulfill what he was called to do. I wonder how many of us are afraid to fulfill what we've been called to do because of maybe the temptation to shut up, because of the temptation to look at your limb that's missing, Or maybe you have people moving in on you in the field because they think that you're not going to hit a grand slam because of what you look like, what you smell like, or where you come from. A guy, you may have heard of him by the name of Winston Churchill. He said, success is not final. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal, he says. It is the courage to continue that counts. The courage to continue. You don't feel like you can. I mean, I've heard this many, many times, that feelings come and go. I mean, all of us know that our feelings are like the waves of the ocean. Sometimes you're up, as the song says, sometimes you're down. Sometimes you're level to the ground. Sometimes you just, you think that you're just an inch or two shy from being 6 foot under. Because life is throwing so many curveballs at you. Over in Joshua in the Old Testament, chapter 1, Joshua chapter 1, verse 9. We've read this, I can't tell you how many times, but there's a broader story. There's a broader picture than just this one verse in Joshua 9. It says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord God is with you wherever you go. That's great. That's wonderful. That's beautiful. That's inspirational. But the picture's wider than that. Have you ever focused on something in your life so minutely that you don't see the whole story until you widen that lens out quite a bit? Let's back up a little bit here. In Joshua 1, verse 6, it says this. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I will give them. Now let me back up a bit even more. Joshua was the helper of Moses. Moses, we all know, at least some of us know, was the guy who split the Red Sea, a bunch of other stuff. Before that, he was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter as a baby. He grew up in Egypt, and he had it all. He had everything he could possibly ever want, but then he realized that, I need to do more. That my life is bigger than just being the son of Pharaoh. So he decided to make some radical moves in his lives for the sake of other people. Eventually, over the course of decades, Moses passed away. Joshua stepped up to try to fill as much of his shoes as possible. He couldn't fill them all, of course, but he tried to fill some of them. So here's where this backstory comes from. So in verse 7, it says, be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. There's always a then. There's always a caveat that if you do this, this will happen. But if you don't do this, then this can't happen. Okay, verse 8. Study this book of instruction continually. Talk about the Holy Scriptures. Meditate on it day and night, so you'll be sure to obey everything that's written in it. I'm in Joshua 1, still in verse 8. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. Now let me just back up again. That it says that you can do all this, but you have to invest completely what's in the Scriptures that will give you the strength to do what you need to do to fulfill what you're called to do. I think that philosophy, frankly, stands for you and me too. Verse 9. This is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. But it comes back to, there's verse 9. I'll say it 3 or 4 or 5 times. Verse 9 sounds great, but that's the tail end of what God was telling Joshua to do. Let me kind of broaden the story a bit more and paraphrase what was just said. Make sure you carry out this revelation that Moses commanded you. This paraphrase says of the same text, Joshua 1. Every bit of it. It says, don't get off track, either left or right, so as to make sure you know where you're going. And don't for a minute let this book of Revelation out of your mind. Ponder on it day and night, making sure you practice everything that's written in it. Then you'll get where you're going. Then you'll succeed. Haven't I commanded you strength and courage Don't be timid. Don't be discouraged. Your God is with you with every step you take. You know, it's like trying to pass a test without studying the stuff. It's like trying to pass a math test or an English test or whatever, a driving test. Imagine trying to pass a driving test, your driving exam, without studying the book. It's unlikely that you're going to pass the test. Your decision to stick with stuff or to not stick with stuff can either make you or break you. How many folks in your life have you met that are constant quitters? And you look back in their lives and they've quit there and 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 there. And they've never really accomplished anything because everything they've started, they never completed. Amen. When we were having our house built, I was leaning heavily on the builders because I thought it was going to take about 8.75 years for them to build the house. It seemed like it was going to take 8.75 years to build a house. It took about a year-ish to build a house. But the point being that you know, that's not some of the workers are just hanging out, smoking, and having a grand old time. I'm thinking, wait a minute, you're not paying interest on this loan. The longer you're taking to build this house, the more it's costing me. How many times haven't you been around people that are just dawdling, if that's a proper English word, dawdling or goofing off or not getting much done, and then you look back 30, 40 years later and they still haven't gotten anything done? I don't want to be one of those folks. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, when a resolute young fellow steps up to the great bully, the world, and takes him boldly by the beard, he's often surprised to find it comes off in his hand, and that it is only tied on to scare away the timid adventurers. Have you ever met people that are full of hot air? In fact, in my lifetime, I would say that over half the people are full of hot air. They have this image of, I don't know what you want to call it politely from a pulpit, but they're full of hot air. Can I be polite from the pulpit? They're full of it in such a way that they come across as they're everything to everybody, or they think they have all the wisdom of the world, and they think that they have all the answers, when in fact they're about that deep. Whereas the quiet ones, many times, the quiet ones who don't say much, but they do so much more, they're the deep ones. They're the ones who are full of knowledge. They're the ones who study. They're the ones who work harder than most. One of my favorite authors, Orison Swett Marden, he lived about 120 some years ago. He said, most of our obstacles would melt away if instead of cowering before them, we should make up our minds to walk boldly through them. There's been so many times, A, if I was single, and B, if I was an idiot, that when I was in a traffic jam, I would just like to run right over the cars to get through the traffic. But you know what? I realize that sometimes I can't do that. But I can do that in other areas of my life. That is, I don't have to wait for others to get where they need to go oftentimes, because if I'm waiting for others, let me give you another example. If I'm waiting for person A, B, C, and D to pass their driving test, do you think I'm gonna wait for very long for them to pass their driving? No, I'm going to jump ahead out because I've studied, I've done the hard work. Well, what I'm saying here is you and I can only get where we're trying to get to when we consistently do the hard work. And the hard work, and part of it is frankly investing in what's in here consistently. Because that's the gasoline in our engine, frankly, that we need to make sure that we maintain and do the things that we're supposed to do. Right. Romans chapter 12, New Testament, a paraphrase of Romans 12, verse 2. It says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world. Again, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but be a new and different person with a fresh newness in all you do and think. Then you will learn from your own experience how His ways, God's ways, will really satisfy you. You know, it's pretty simple to be a copycat. Have you ever been, well, most of us have been young once or twice in our lifetime, but have you ever met copycats that do stuff because other people are doing stuff, that they're heading down the wrong road, but because they're doing it, they're going to follow the crowd. Jesus wasn't one who followed crowds. Jesus was one who had crowds following him.
Yeah, that's right.
And if that shouldn't be an example to you and I, that we're not always supposed, in fact, I'd probably say we're not supposed to follow the crowds, that we're supposed to live a life that enables people and frankly inspires people to follow us. Dale Carnegie says, inaction breeds fear and doubt. In fact, his exact quote is, inaction breeds doubt and fear. Inaction breeds doubt and fear. Have you ever gotten really scared because the issue that you're facing gets bigger because you're not taking steps toward it? We read in the Old Testament how young David faced this big warrior, and he had an army of people watching this warrior named Goliath, and David was smaller in size than this warrior, but as David approached the warrior, David realized that what he had was much more than what the quote giant had. I think the closer we get to whatever we're battling against with the ammunition that we need, that we're going to see that it's not as big as we thought it was, because we know what's in us. That the scriptures say the greater is God that's in us than what's in the world. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense? Anyway. We read constantly, time after time, how people that make a difference throughout history have chosen to do stuff that most of us would be terrified to do. We read about Oskar Schindler during World War II. He saved over 1,000 people because he chose to step up. James McWhinney said, the quality of your life will be determined by your ability to fully express the drive that you feel boiling inside you, deep down, whatever you know it can be, you must be. That is, I have to allow that passion, that desire, that whatever you want to call it, that's way down deep inside you to, let's just say, be smelled by everybody else. Yesterday, my wife cooked some corn on the cob. Does anybody here like corn on the cob? I mean, I like corn on the cob. You know, I don't like what it does to my teeth. It gets off, but anyway. But the smell of the corn on the cob cooking was all through the house. You see, when you place yourself in a situation that, how can I put it politely, that you are fermenting so much with what you're trying to accomplish that people around you are going to smell it. People around you are going to see it. There's a story. It says, I grew up and I knew I was different. And I hated it. I was born with a cleft palate. And all these people teased this young girl all the time. And there came this test that this young lady had a hearing test, actually. And her, those people with cleft palates, sometimes their speech is a little different because they don't have the right palate or a complete palate at the top of their mouth, which hinders them from speaking clearly. Longer story short, that the girl was teased all the time, constantly, all the time. Well, when the young lady gets to the top of the classroom, and the woman, the teacher, expressed an interest in this student, the woman whispered into this student's ear that she wished and prayed that this little girl was her daughter. Because she saw the fight, she saw the battle that this little girl was going through. I think it's very tempting for some of us, at least, to keep our mouths shut, to keep our dreams quiet, to stay withdrawn to ourselves when we get maybe inundated with teasing or inundated with intimidation by other people that frankly don't know what we're trying to accomplish in our lives. A guy named Chris said, courage is overrated. Courage is overrated. He says, you'll always be afraid of something. But the important thing is to avoid letting your fears making your decisions. Your fears make your decisions a lot. My fears used to make my decisions a lot. I've met, though, and I've read about, studied people that were terrified to do what they eventually became to do. In fact, Barbara Streisand's a great example of this. That she still, according to things I've read, still gets big-time stage fright every time she would go out on stage. Now, this is Barbara Streisand. For those, she sings, she has a great voice, and she still gets terrified. But guess what? She doesn't allow the fear to stop her from making a difference in her craft. A guy named Joe Runyon writes, I just did one small thing. I found one small thing I wanted to do, then I figured out how to do it. When I did that, nothing bad happened. I tried something bigger. Then something bigger. Pretty soon it snowballed, and I ended up surprised at this story I found myself in. There's this show on TV, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, that has Bear Grylls in it. And Bear Grylls, who is a British Special Forces manly man, grunt-worthy, can I get a grunt from some guy? I mean, really a manly man kind of guy, right? Well, he takes these famous people out on these excursions for 2 or 3 days, and he challenges them to do stuff that they never could imagine seeing themselves do. One lady, was it a lady? She ate, well, I'm not going to get too descriptive because it's really gross, but she ate a mouse, a cooked mouse. They boiled a mouse and they ate it. You know, I had to frankly look away because, I'll even go a little step farther. They didn't have any water, so they cooked it in what water they could make. How's that for being G-rated? That's gross. That is disgusting, okay? However, sometimes you need people in your life that are going to pull you to do stuff that you wouldn't even consider doing on your own. Which means that you place yourself around people, listen, that you place yourself around people and you place yourself around stories and examples that push and pull you in areas that you know you should be going anyway, but you don't want to go there because you're afraid at the moment. So you need this catalyst, these people in your lives that will push and that will pull. And that's not a bad thing to place you at the disposal of those kinds of people, making any sense at all.
Right, good.
General Powell said one time, he said, I think whether you're having setbacks or not, the role of a leader is to always display a winning attitude. Whoa, is that hard sometimes? We're all leaders, right? In some form, right?
Right.
He says, in other words, don't always expect to be great. Disappointments and failures and setbacks are a normal part of the life cycle of a unit or a company, and what the leader has to do is constantly be up and say, we have a problem, let's go and get it. Well, guess what? Sometimes you may not have a Colin Powell around you, so guess what you and I have to do consistently? Look in the mirror and be Colin Powell. And say, you know what, we got a problem, we got to fix it. And sometimes that is not easy. Have you ever been in situations where you tried to pull and push yourself so hard and you ain't budging yourself? You talk to yourself and say, we need to get going, we need to do this, and that person in the mirror ain't moving, that person in the mirror ain't listening? Am I the only one?
No.
Who just cannot get your butt up off the sofa to do what you're supposed to be doing? Well, guess what? You and I have to put ourselves, again, for the third or fourth time, at the disposal of other people that will put a fire underneath your lower parts to get you moving in the direction that you need to get moving to. A daughter complained to her father about life and how things were so hard for her. She didn't know how she was going to make it and wanted to give up. So she was tired of struggling. It seemed that as soon as one problem was solved, another one arose. Anybody lived in that neighborhood? Her father, a chef, took her to the kitchen and filled 3 pots of water and placed each on a high fire. Soon the pots came to a boil. In one he placed carrots, and in the second he placed eggs, and the last he placed ground the coffee beans. And he let them sit and boil without saying a word. The daughter was not really sure what was going on and impatiently waiting, wondering what in the world her father was doing. In about 20 minutes, he turned off the burners. He fished the carrots out and placed them in a bowl. And he pulled the eggs out and placed them in a bowl. Then he ladled the coffee out and placed it in a bowl, turning to her and then asked her, "What do you see?" "Well, duh, Dad, carrots, eggs, and coffee." He brought her closer and asked her to feel the carrots. She did and noted that the carrots were soft. He then asked her to take the egg and break it, and after pulling off the shell, she observed a hard-boiled egg. Finally, he asked her to sip the coffee, and she smelled it. It tastes like rich aroma. It was great. She said, "Well, what's the point?" He explained that each of the items had faced the same adversity, boiling water, but each reacted differently. The carrot went in strong and hard, right? But after being subjected to the boiling water, it softened and became weak. The egg had been fragile. Its thin outer shell had protected its interior that was liquid and soft. But after sitting through the boiling water, its insides became hardened, right? The ground coffee beans were unique, however. After being in boiling water, the beans changed to water. "So which are you?" he asked his daughter. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Do you become weak like the carrot? Hard on the inside like the egg? Or do you change the circumstances like the coffee beans?" So there's different ways to react to hardship, isn't it? Don't be weak or suppress things, but change circumstances from within. I'll tell you flat out that is not easy. And I need to listen to my own sermons more often. Anybody been there? You give all this advice to other people, but then you say, it's different for me because you don't know what I'm going through. There's so many people been through so much worse stuff than all of us combined. Times 100, times 1,000. So relatively speaking, we're just a bunch of sissies when it compares to humanity over thousands and thousands of years. Don't be offended because I called you a sissy. That's us as in me too, right? Sometimes you and I have to maybe better the odds of us not quitting. Let me give you a couple of reasons why, or maybe some skill sets, some habits, maybe just 3 or 4 of them, that will keep you from throwing in the towel. Number one is not taking advice from people more messed up than you. Have you ever met people that try to give you all the advice in the world, but when you look back at their life, they don't know diddly. They don't know squat. They're messed up in the head. Their families are messed up. Their lives are messed up. But they'll give you all the advice in the world. Avoid those people. Number 2, not to allow the shame of past mistakes to stop you in your tracks. How many here has wrecked a car once? Okay, so I'm not alone. That's good. Okay, we wrecked a car. So should that wreck keep you from getting behind the wheel again? Well, we do that in our own life. We mess up, sometimes more than a few times, and then we're afraid to try again because we assume we're going to mess up. That's not a good way to live. Number 3, don't be wishy-washy about your decisions. Have you ever met people, do you want a cheeseburger or do you want a hot dog? I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, make a decision. Choose cheeseburger or hot dog or whatever thing that you're going through. Be decisive about your life. And number 4, this is a huge one for all of us. This is painful to even speak. Stop procrastinating. Stop putting off stuff that you know that you should have done 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes. You know what I'm saying? We keep putting off stuff, and I had something I had to do that I've been putting off for about a week and a half. To you, it is so stupid and so minor, and it is so stupid, so minor. But I kept putting it off and putting it off until I took myself by the neck, wrote it down, hint, hint, wrote it down, because what gets written gets done. What gets written gets done. Write it down. I got it done. And now I feel like 10 pounds lighter because that nagging thing that I know I should have been doing, small, minor, petty, stupid little thing that I knew I should have gotten done, now it's done. Now I don't have to worry about it anymore. We put off and procrastinate stuff that we shouldn't be procrastinating at all. Number 4, stop running from problems that need to be fixed. Now, one of my problem solvers is my wife. Okay, I married her. You can't marry her again. I'm married, so you can't have my problem solver. I buy her the tools to fix the stuff around the house. Because anyway, you need to put people in your life that can help you fix the problems that need to be fixed in your life. If you don't have the people in your life that can help you fix the problems in your life, then what do you need to do? You need to recruit those people. You need to find those people. You need to surround yourself with people. Rocky Balboa, the great fake boxer, he says, "You, me, or nobody," he says in quotes, "is going to hit you as hard as life." Remember the scene talking to his son on the street? But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much can you take and keep moving forward? That's how winning is done. I can't tell you. Let me rephrase it. It seems like I get hit more than I take steps forward. Anybody else been there? You get up and you go to take a step forward and you get hit and you get knocked back. And in a certain amount of time, maybe it's minutes for you, seconds, hours, years, months, decades, you get back up again and you go. It seems like you go to take another step forward and you get hit and knocked back again. Well, if you stay down, guess what? You're never going to eventually take the steps that you need to take. And by the way, you're not in this alone. I'm not in this alone. This happens to everybody. Everybody who's ever become great has always been knocked down over and over and over and over times, 1,000 times again. But they always got back up. They always kept going. So why are you continuing to move forward? Well, that's a question I can't ask for you, but your why, and I've taught this before, but your why needs to be so big that it's going to pull you out of bed in the morning. It's going to push you to do the things that you need to do. My why to fix that nagging issue that I was talking about moments ago was because I was tired of that nag that I knew I had to get it done. I was sick of it. I put it off for a week and a half. Like, I'm done. This thing's in my ear. It's on my shoulder. It was just a little accounting exercise that I had to do with my bookwork. That's it. Not had to dig a ditch or not had to take down a tree. Just half an hour worth of mathematical banking stuff. That's it. Stupid. But I kept putting it off and putting it off because I didn't feel like it. I don't know about you, but most of life's battles, you're not going to feel like fighting. But guess what? You got to fight it anyway.
Amen.
Ben Johnson said he knows not his own strength that he has not met adversity. Again, he knows not his own strength that hath not met adversity. I told you, most of you have heard the story, some of you don't. Maybe 3 years ago, I plateaued at a certain bench press, and then I saw this older guy. Now, you look at me, you think I'm like 70. I'm not. I'm 71. Not really. But I'm looking at this guy at the gym next to me. He's like 20, 25 years older than me, and he's benching twice as much as me. I'm thinking, wait a minute here. We have that. Because I thought that I could only do so much bench. So then I was like, wait a minute. If the old guy, in quotes, can do it, shame on me. So after he went home, and now that's all I do is what he was doing. The point being that sometimes you get this image in your own brain that you can't do that because, whatever your because is, until you see somebody else who's doing it, that you should be able to do it, but they're doing it and they're older than you or poorer than you or less educated than you, or come from a certain demographic that you know you're definitely better than them. You know what I'm saying? But then that they give you the inspiration to do it, and then you do it, and then you realize that you should have been doing it years before. That's kind of like what I'm saying, that you need to surround yourself. I was at the gym the other day, and instead of I put two plates, one each side when I do the bench. So there's this guy that he was shorter than me. Yeah, he was about 15 years younger than me, granted, but he had 4 plates doing bench. I know what I just said, okay? I'm not there yet, but I told him, I said, dude, you inspire me. Because if the dude can do it, this young whippersnapper of a guy, 31, 32 years old, can do it, then that gives me hope that I can do it. The point is that you have to pay attention to the people that are getting it done around you, because they could be the gasoline for your engine to do what you need to do to accomplish the great things that you're trying to accomplish in your own life. Thomas Edison's instructors, when he was a kid, said, quote, he's too stupid to learn anything. Thomas Edison. We see the end of Thomas Edison's life, don't we? What he did and how hard he worked to invent so many things. But we didn't hear the story of he was called stupid in school all the time. He was fired from his first 2 jobs for being, quote, non-productive. Thomas Edison. Again, we read about the end of the story. We don't read or understand many times of the struggles and the difficulties of people for years and decades before they were able to accomplish the stuff that they were to accomplish. So in fact, in one situation, he attempted to invent something 1,000 times and couldn't accomplish it for 999 times or more. And eventually, he didn't quit at 700. I think I would have quit at 70, frankly. But he kept going through the hundreds until about 1,000, and he finally got it. That seems to be a pattern, if you haven't caught that already today. That seems to be a pattern about people who've gotten stuff done. They just kept going and going and going and going and going. Have they adjusted course? Yes. You don't want to bang your head on the same wall over and over, and that wall's not coming down. Move to the right a little bit. Be willing to move to the left just a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Because your path is going to meander here and there by the boulders that come up in your life. But you're always moving forward if you decide to keep moving ahead. One day, a lady was driving along with her dad, and there came up a storm, and this young lady asked her father, "What should we do?" He said, "Well, we need to keep driving." Cars began to pull over the side, and the storm was getting worse. "What should I do?" the young lady asked. "Keep driving," her father said. On a few feet, she noticed the 18-wheelers were also pulling over. She told her dad, "I must pull over too. I can barely see ahead. It's terrible, and everyone's pulling over." Her father told her, "Don't give up, just keep driving." Now, the storm was terrible, but she never stopped driving, and as soon as she could see a little more clearly, after a couple of miles, was on dry land again, and the sun came out. Her father said, "Now you can pull over and get out." But she said, "Why now?" He said, "When you get out, look back at all the people," listen, look back at all the people who are still in the storm, because you never gave up, your storm is now over. Sometimes we just got to keep driving. Sometimes you just got to keep moving forward, even though the storms get really bad. I think that shoe fits all of us.
Amen.
In some form, in some difficulty. Because the temptation, the overwhelming temptation for all of us, is to stop in the middle of the storm. But we can't. We got to keep going. Over in Psalm 46, verse 1, it says, "God is our refuge and strength." God is our refuge, where you hide, and our strength. A very present help in trouble, or a help that's reliable. Do you have 1 or 2 people that you can call that when you're in deep doo-doo, that you can call them up and they're there. You know they're there. I can remember I was heading through Baltimore. I was heading east on Edmonton Avenue, right at Mount Street, North Mount Street, for those who know Baltimore. And a guy ran a stop sign and plowed into my 1986 Cutlass Supreme, my baby, my child. I love that car. Still love that car. Totaled the car. I was hurting. Was taken to the hospital. And guess who showed up? I called my wife or somebody. But guess who all showed up? Butch showed up. Garrett showed up. Anthony showed up. Other folks showed up. I didn't call, but they haven't been in an accident in many years. They showed up. Why? Because they cared. They cared. You and I have to have people in our lives that will jump, that will drop what they're doing, that if you're drowning, they're there to not throw you a lifeline and say, hope you catch it. They're out there in the water with you, holding you up. That's the kind of people I want in my life. Verse 2, there in Psalm 46, therefore I will not fear, though the earth should change and the mountains slip into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains quake and its swelling pride, that we can still take refuge in God's love. I'm going to end with a story. When 12-year-old Jason was hit by a car and suffered, among many things, a paralyzed arm, he could never have dreamed that decades later he'd be a world-class endurance sports champion. Today he can swim faster, ride further, and run incredible distances as an Ironman and Ultraman, and he does it all without the full use of his right arm. In 2009, he was named the ESPY Award winner for the best male athlete with a disability, and first male triathlete to win such an honor. In addition to numerous championships, he's also the author of Running on Faith, the autobiography that chronicles his rise to fame and how his belief in God got him there. His relentless message is summed up well when he wrote, quote, "If you don't stop, you can't be stopped. If you don't stop, you can't be stopped." So that's where I want to end here today. I've got plenty more to share. But that's the big picture of this text here today. That you and I have to keep going whether or not we think we can reach that finish line. Because when you look back, if you don't stop, if you keep moving forward, you're going to see that 92-94% of the people have stopped because of the storm. And you kept going, you kept walking, you kept driving, you kept fighting, you kept doing those little things every single day that add up to the big things because you refuse to give up and quit.